Welcome back to Thrive in the Word. Thank you for joining us today. If you didn't listen to yesterday's podcast, go back and listen to it because in yesterday's podcast, we give you a foundation for this study now in the church at Sardis. It's very, very important that you know the background, that you know the location, that you know what this city is like, and that you know what this church is like. Now, we talked about how Jesus addresses himself to this city as being, having the seven spirits of God, and we talked about that very shortly. And then he holds in his hand the seven stars, and the seven stars are the totality of churches. Now, this is what he says to the one specific church, the church at Sardis, and it is not nice. You know, Jesus addresses this church different than any other of the other churches. He doesn't come right out and say, this is what I like about you. What does Jesus say? Let's take a look. We're back in verse number 1 at the end, towards the end of the verse, and he says this, I know your deeds, that you have a name, that you are alive, but you are dead. Jesus doesn't have anything good to say to this church. Nothing, not one word of good to say. Now remember, he's addressing a church that's probably very comfortable, not even probably, they're comfortable. There's very little persecution. There's very little opposition. And Jesus is looking at them and he's saying this. He says, I know, I see, the Greek word here is eido again. It means to know by seeing or by sight, or to be familiar with by sight. I know your deeds. Period. He says, I know what you're doing. I can see what you're doing. I understand what you're doing. And then he goes on and he says something that we really need to look at. He says these words, that you have a name, that you are alive. You see, the church at Sardis was, in many ways, the church that all the rest of the churches looked up to. If they were going to compare themselves, they would compare themselves to the church at Sardis. You know what? That's what we need to be like. Man, that's what we need to be like. Pastor, that church at Sardis, that's what we need to be doing, Pastor. You need to be following their program. You need to be doing what that church is doing. You see, the church at Sardis was known as a church in which there was a lot of welfare. There was a lot of programs taking care of people. And you know what? We need to understand that in itself is not bad. But you know what? Some of the most powerful welfare programs in the world are run by organizations that are religious, but they are not Christian. They don't have Christ at the center of their organization. Do they do good things? Yeah. But doing good things is not evidence of a strong church. And that's what Jesus is trying to get to. He says, I know your deeds. I see your deeds. And he says, I know that everybody around here is saying, man, you need to be like the church of Sardis. That church has a name. Oh. But you know what? It was a church that had a name only. Even though they had all kinds of nice deeds and programs and assistance for people. Do you understand that all of those things do not make a strong church? If you go over to the wonderful country of Poland, I've been there many, many times. Poland has two leading religious organizations. One is the Catholic Church, of course. You all knew that already. But you know the second one is to the Jehovah's Witness. It's the second strongest organization in Poland. Now let me ask you a question. Are they Christian? Do they have Christ at the center of their lives? You see, we need to understand that just because it's called a church, just because it's a religious organization, does not mean that this religious organization has Christ at the center, where Jesus is the Lord. I hope that you understand that, because Jesus is saying something here. And again, I believe that these 7 churches are 7 types of churches in the world. And you know what I believe? I believe that we have a lot of churches that fall into this classification. They are a church in name only. Just yesterday I read of a church that used to have a great reputation. Now they do co-services. In other words, they mix Hinduism and Muslim faith together. And you know what? They're doing nice things. But Jesus is no longer the Lord over that church. So Jesus says, he says to this church, he says that you have a name, that you are alive, but then he says, but you are dead. He comes right out and says it. He doesn't hem-haw around and try to be nice. He says, no, people say you're alive, but you're dead. Now, this word dead is the Greek word nekros. And it means actually a dead corpse. Now, I'm sure that the people in Sardis could say, well, look we have this program, we have this and this and this and this and this. But Jesus is saying to this church, you're dead. You're nothing but a corpse. You once had life, but the life has left you. And this is a very blistering accusation. Jesus has nothing good to say about this church who had all these activities, all these things, all these programs. He has nothing good to say about them. The only thing that he says that classifies them in all reality is you are dead. Just think about that. Think about that. You're nothing but a corpse. How many of you know every corpse has been alive at one time, but now you're dead? Now, let me tell you this, and we're going to end for today. I believe one of the things that causes their deadness is they had no struggles for their faith. We're going to talk to you again tomorrow. I hope that you join us.